there's a statement by the then head of the RSS, K.S. Sudarshan, that there were actually Swayamsevaks of the RSS posted to protect the mosque building, and that there were actual fights between the RSS deputies and the common rank and file. You see, Hinduism has such a negative reputation, which a true retelling of Indian history will change for the better. I mean, there are so many great achievements on the Hindu side that you ought to be proud of. And so, if that story can be realistically told, then, ultimately, after maybe 2-3 generations, this will remedy the present situation.
Namaste and welcome to Sangam Talks. This year has begun with a bang, with the Pran Pratishtha of Ramlala, followed by the flamboyant display of the Indian Republic at Kartavya Path. Now today in our studios we have Dr. Elst with us. Dr. Elst, welcome to the studio. Dr. Elst is an eminent scholar, an eminent historian as well. In the best sense possible, he has kept a very keen eye on all affairs that concern India, right from its history to its society and also its scriptures. Dr. Elst has kept a very critical eye on India. It's always been dispassionate but never not interested. Today is the day we're going to be speaking to him about Ayodhya and many other issues which reflect on the upcoming elections as well. Dr. Elst, welcome to the show. So you were invited to the Pran Pratishtha, a very auspicious ceremony, a very prestigious ceremony. What were your thoughts in it?
Well, first of all, I was fairly happy to be invited. I saw myself there as the flag bearer of the scholars who had collected the evidence. You see, all of whom have left this world. So I try to, make them present to some extent. Other people who had been invited were Meenakshi Jain, who wrote very important books about the later court proceedings, especially concerning the case, and K.K. Mohammed, the archaeologist, who was already there in the 70s with B. Bilal when he excavated the pillar bases, and then was prominently there in the court-ordered excavations of 2003. So that at least was a sign of appreciation from the side of the organizers for the scholarly input. And that I think is important and is a very good sign. Because otherwise, of course, in the press they had made some fun about the very visible presence of cricket stars and movie stars and so on. Well, the more directly concerned people were also there. There was, of course, a majority, or at any rate, a very large number of people dressed in saffron. I don't know what all their specific titles are, but that class of people was very much there. But yes, you see, the main speech was given by a political leader, Narendra Modi, that also earned some criticism here and there. But you see, I thought it was important to be there. I mean, I know that there is criticism on the secularist side that Modi could have been there as a citizen of India. Nobody can deny him that. But that he should have made clear that he was not there as the prime minister. So that from a secularist viewpoint, that's a reasonable argument. Then there were a number of Hindu arguments against it, like that the building was not complete yet and should not have been inaugurated yet, that ritually Narendra Modi should have been there in the company of his wife, his Dharma Patni, and a few more like that. So maybe it was not perfect, but it was important enough to be there. And anyway, you see now that the Hindus have control over this site, they can improve it and so on as much as they want later on. So it was an important occasion. I'm very glad I was there. The atmosphere was electrifying. I have already compared it with the atmosphere at a rock concert as they exist in the West, with this difference that there all the excitement is quite artificial, is really about nothing, whereas here it was for real.
Reason.
Yes.
Numerous film stars were also invited,
Yes.
Dr. Elst, who many people thought were not directly concerned with the Ram Janmabhoomi movement or with Ram Lalla per se. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's important to see that a number of different groups in India have contributed. So even film stars may play a role, like I've just seen an interview on TV with this Arun Govil, who used to play Rama in some past TV serial. So, I mean, in their own way, they also contributed. Then, among political people, of course, it's very important, and on this occasion, it really needs to be emphasized that it's not a BJP affair. Both the BJP itself and its enemies have tried to portray it like that. Now, okay, in the very beginning, you have the role of some Hindu Mahasabha and Jan Sangh people, like this K.K. Nayar, who had a sort of political, supervision over the events and made sure that the idols, once they were installed, remained there, which Nehru didn't like. Apparently, I think, this is just anecdotal, but nevertheless, it's telling that he and his wife stood for elections, he for the Jan Sangh and she for the Hindu Mahasabha, which at that time, even after Gandhi's murder, was still quite a presence in that region, like especially Gorakhpur, but also Ayodhya. Then, well, it goes a bit into hibernation, so the place is cordoned off for the common worshippers, but it remains a temple because a priest performs the rituals. Then in 1983, it is another Hindu Mahasabha fellow, Mahanta Vaidyanath, the personal guru of Yogi Adityanath, and two Congress people who start this movement for the liberation of Rama's birthplace. These two Congress people are a local politician, Dowdayal Khanna, and, quite importantly, an ex-prime minister, Gulzari Lal Nanda. So the Congress was really a party to the building of the temple. And later on, this becomes even clearer when Rajiv Gandhi becomes the prime minister. He actively pursues the building of the temple. But before I come to that, in 1984, a year after the start of this movement, the VHP throws its lot in with this movement. That's quite important because they have the numbers. And so they bring in this whole agitation, Kar Sevaks. Then at the government level, Rajiv Gandhi does pursue a policy which at that time he conceives as the typical Congress side horse trading, as if it's no big deal, some sweeteners for the Muslim leadership. And then in return, he's going to arrange for the temple for the Hindus. And so at that time, the Ayodhya issue was not yet the enormous polarizer that it was going to become. So he still thought that he could get away with this arrangement. Then you get the BJP, of course, with they passed this Palampur resolution in 1989, and they start this Rath Yatra. So even though today people say, no, the BJP had no merit in it, well, that at least was an important merit. But I have to add that after they win the elections twice, because of this Ayodhya agitation, that then suddenly they withdraw from the affair, because by that time it has become a great polarizer. They feel it's like a hot potato, it's going to burn us at some point. Let's take a distance. And especially after the demolition in 1992, they prefer not to be associated with it. Then, as you know, in 1989, there's an opposition government, as they used to call it in those days when Congress was the natural government party. And so then this VP Singh, is a leftist government, at first has an alliance with the BJP in the opposition, but then there's a clash between them concerning the stopping of the Rath Yatra in Bihar and the shooting of the Kar Sevaks in Ayodhya. So then that government falls. The socialist Chandrasekhar becomes prime minister. There's a small minority government that's completely dependent on opposition support from Congress. So then again, we have Rajiv Gandhi taking an important initiative. He makes sure that Chandrasekhar calls a scholars meeting in essentially January 1991. Now, he had made it clear several times when he was prime minister that for him, the decision whether there should be a temple in the future ought to depend on the scientific finding whether there was a temple in the past. Now, that's a polite way of saying I want a temple, because everybody knew that there was evidence. You see, it's only in 1989 that the JNU historians come out with a statement, suddenly making this controversial and claiming that there was no temple there, which had a great influence. It's only very rarely that, us intellectuals have the pleasure of really making a difference. And so there, just this statement by a number of academics makes all politicians fearful. Suddenly it's not such an easy topic anymore. And, they fear of being associated with Hindu fascism and all that. And so it becomes difficult. And at that point, or from that point onwards, the very idea of demolishing the mosque building, which is an inevitable part of the process towards building the temple, becomes unthinkable. That's also one reason why the BJP takes distance. So the scholars, of course, find enough evidence, a bit more than was already available, but essentially they just continue the consensus that was there. So then you see nothing should stand in the way of building the temple. But a few things do stand in the way. The Supreme Court had promised a verdict before the 6th of December 1992, which promise it didn't keep. And the BJP had called this gathering, but more to prove to the secularists, we can control Hindu anger, rather than expressing that Hindu, will to build the Rama temple. There have even been statements at the time that not only the BJP, the RSS didn't want a demolition, even the VHP, in spite of the sentiments among their rank and file. So when the Kar Sevaks start with the demolition, not only L.K. Advani was supposed to lead the ceremony. He didn't like it at all. He collapsed, he started crying. And later on, he called it the blackest day of his life. Even Ashok Singhal tried to stop the people. Later on, with the Lieberhan Commission about the guilt for the demolition, and then the court case that was to follow from it, there's a statement by the then head of the RSS, K.S. Sudarshan, that there were actually Swayamsevaks of the RSS posted to protect the mosque building. and that there were actual fights between the RSS deputies and the common rank and file, the Karsevaks. And so this is probably true. I mean, for all the documents and so on that we have of the RSS, this sounds like a very true account. Yet, maybe there was one big leader who did support the demolition. And here I base myself, first of all, on the information given by a number of Karsevaks. But of them, you could still say, well, maybe they didn't know the whole picture. And so, especially the fact of being there does not necessarily mean that they're better informed. And the whole thing was happening. They were in the middle of it. But there's another source, Sridhar Damle. You may not have heard the name. So there are two important books about the RSS. One was written in the 80s, and one was written like 2 years ago by Walter Anderson and Sridhar Damle. Now, this is a typical colonial arrangement. So Walter Anderson was the big man with all the connections, with all the money and so on, a good publisher. And then Sridhar Damle was the native informer. So, you know, he knows perfect Marathi and he knows all these circles inside out. So I think at the moment, you know, if you want me to pinpoint the person most specialized on the Sangh Parivar, it's him. And so he emphasizes that the Karsevaks received support from Moropant Pingle. That's a name that can certainly be mentioned. There are a few more names there, like the technical organizer. That's a name that I've systematically withheld because I think it is up to Indian journalists to find the name. And it's very easy. I mean, I'm a foreigner, my Hindi is so-so. And I had to talk to a few people and I knew. So any journalist here in Delhi can do that. You know, but they all had decided, oh, no, we must declare Advani guilty, which was completely false. So, you know, I wish you all good luck to find. I know the man is still alive, so you can go interview him.
You were a mystery man indeed, Dr. Elst.
At any rate, the demolition happened and that changed a bit of the political situation. The BJP received the guilt for the whole, they were blamed, nothing to do about it. And so they were on the defensive, which was in fact one of the reasons why Prime Minister Narasimha Rao allowed it all to happen. So neither the BJP Chief Minister Kalyan Singh nor the Prime Minister intervened. You know, at several levels, they could still have stopped the demolition, and they didn't. And so, as I explained, you see, the whole idea of a demolition had become so unthinkable. Yeah, and so from the viewpoint of Narasimha Rao, it was very good to have the Karsevaks perform the demolition. That way he didn't have to do it. So as a congressman, of course, he enjoyed the sight of seeing the BJP on the defensive. But as a committed Hindu, which he also was, he also thought, well, if we want a temple, then this is the easiest way to get there. And so that's another point where Congress plays an important role in favor of the temple. But that may be the end of it because the Congress today is not the Congress party of back then anymore. At that time, the Congress was a party that, you know, advertised itself as the party of all Indians, and they took that rather serious. They were still a predominantly Hindu party. And so Rajiv Gandhi had wanted to give something to the Muslims, something to the Hindus, which, by the way, is one reason that I think that Sonia Gandhi should have been there at the Prana Pratishtha. You know, she should have at least represented her husband, who had done a lot to get at the point of a Prana Pratishtha. And so anyways, he chose not to. And that's significant for the evolution within Congress. It is no longer a Hindu party. Yeah, it's now very much a party of the minorities. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, but for the time being, I don't see any pro-Hindu gestures from the side of Congress. But anyway, I mean, Congress had done its part. The BJP had done its part. The VHP had done it. The Hindu Mahasabha, and many people without any affiliation, like most of the scholars, were not connected with the Sangh Parivar. A very big, important figure in the background was Sitaram Goel, was an outspoken critic of the Sangh Parivar. But of course, he thought, well, this is for the larger Hindu cause. If this means cooperating with the Sangh Parivar, then that's what I'll do. Okay. And you see, that's the way it should be. Hindu society as a whole has contributed to the temple. You can't say that it is the work of one particular party or organization. And so that's what's good about it.
When Prime Minister spoke from the dais
Yes.
at the Ram Janmabhoomi temple at Ramlala's Pran Pratishtha, he spoke as the Prime Minister
Yes.
of India. So, and his speech was very well received indeed. People found a lot of meaning and connection
Yes.
to what he said about India as a rising civilization or as a rejuvenating civilization. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, that Narendra Modi is a very lucky man. He himself didn't make the difference in getting the temple in place. I mean, some devotees of the BJP say it's only thanks to the BJP that it got there. But I think that's incorrect. The decisive judicial verdict was the one by the Uttar Pradesh High Court in 2010, because that recognized the evidence, recognized that the site had a Hindu history, and therefore awarded the site to the Hindus, albeit practically in a rather compromised way, in the sense that they also allowed a Muslim site to come up just next to it, which was, which has in the past already often proved to be a formula for riots. Yeah. So in that sense, the Supreme Court improved a bit on it, but essentially the Supreme Court only confirmed the verdict of the lower court. So the verdict of the Supreme Court came under BJP rule, both in UP and in the center. But the earlier verdict, which I think is the far more important one, came when the BJP was in power neither in UP nor at the center. To quite an extent, the judiciary in India is really important. I mean, is really independent. And so those people who say, yeah, but it never would have given that verdict had not the BJP been in power, they, first of all, are demonstrably wrong. And secondly, and for nationalists perhaps more damningly, they are saying that India is a banana republic where it is the government that prescribes to the courts what verdict they should give. So that's not a true story. But at any rate, Advani, he had some merits, but he was not even there. He was subtly disinvited. Whereas Modi was there, I mean, he had good karma, I suppose. Somewhere in the past he must have done something good. So he was there to preside over it. And in this case, his speech was quite good. And I mean, as a long-standing critic of Modi's government, I think I have to emphasize that his speech was really impressive. First of all, of course, his rhetoric, his diction and so on was electrifying. But then contents-wise also, now there is a point where I still have criticism, namely the confusion within the RSS, which is being more and more and more promoted, between Hindu and Indian. Those concepts are different. And long ago, you see, Guru Golwalkar and so on, Savarkar and other, leaders in the Hindu movement made that distinction.
Okay.
I mean, even when it's not nice, nevertheless, it's based on that distinction. Like Golwalkar said, the non-Hindus, should be treated well and everything, but they should not have voting rights. They should be treated like as if they're foreigners. Now, I strongly disagree with that, but at least, you see, I have to cite it here because it proves that he makes a distinction between Indian and Hindu. And so the present day Sangh leadership, in that sense, betrays the thoughts, the positions of their old leaders, in the sense that they are blurring that distinction.
But isn't that necessary, Dr. Elst, in the changing scenario when our society has become so heterogeneous?
Well, it was quite heterogeneous at that time. There was still United India, which had 25% Muslims, more than today. So I don't think that is the important change. And in fact, Hinduism never had a problem with heterogeneity.
Never, yeah.
So, they should at least have the intellectual propriety of making that distinction. It doesn't mean that any juridical inequality follows from it, certainly not. But nevertheless, conceptually, there is a difference. And indeed, historically, the word Hindu was introduced by the Muslim invaders with the specific meaning an Indian who is not a Muslim. So that difference is there. Like I wrote at the time a book called Decolonizing the Hindu Mind. Today I see all kinds of activities of the RSS called Decolonizing the Indian Mind. Now, I don't think that Indians who happen to be Muslims or Christians care much about this whole theme of decolonization. That's a Hindu thing. Anyway, so, in that speech, that sort of confusion was also there. Like, for instance, he said that Rama is a means of uniting the Indians.
Precisely.
Well, I am not sure that the average Indian Muslim or Christian thinks the same way. Now, in a sense, he's right, not in a description of what the situation is today, but in a description of an ideal that we are pursuing. There you could say Rama can be the ideal man for all Indians. But that means that, to some extent, Muslims and Christians, are unfaithful to their own religion. And so otherwise it's fine. And among Hindus at any rate it works. You see, everybody was enthusiastic, whether they were Shaiva or Shakta or so. Those differences were not important. Rama was the man of the hour for everyone. And yes, to some extent, also for the minorities. I mean, it is a bit Nehruvian, it is a bit, stereotypically secularist to show pictures of Muslim families celebrating. I mean, this struck me since, the 35 years that I've been coming here, that in newspapers and so on, you have all these fanfare about, some Muslim who is a caretaker for a Hindu temple and, those kinds of syncretism. I mean, they're very exceptional. And in the Muslim world, there is a movement, the Tabligh movement, that is specifically designed to stop all that, to make the Muslims more Muslim and less contaminated with what remains of their Hindu heritage. But, to some extent, these things happen. And I have the impression that in the atmosphere of the Prana Pratishtha, even many Muslims and Christians, fell in line, joined in the excitement. When you saw the newspapers, my God, what a difference. You see, in the years 1990, thereabouts, they always treated the whole idea of a Ram temple as a big scandal, something totally irrational and dangerous and so on. And now, now they were all full of the Rama temple. So yeah, I mean, in the atmosphere, clearly something has changed. And so to that extent, I have not really any problem with Modi saying, okay, Rama for all Indians. This is also because in his speech, he spirited Rama away to the stratosphere. You know, he said that Rama is, what is this, Ananta Kala, you know, forever. And, you know, he's both black and white and so on. I mean, he's above everything. And, you know, if you conceive of Rama like that, well, maybe. And indeed, Hindus have had that conception of Rama next to the one of the hero of these adventures, you know, fetching his wife back from Lanka and so on. But the first time I spent in India was in Varanasi. And so there, at any rate, the word Rama mostly just means gold, what we would translate as gold. Or like in funeral processions, they shout, you know, Rama Nama Satya Hai. You know, there Rama means more than just this historical figure. And so if you treat him as a divine concept, then again, you see, it's more open, more inclusive of all groups. So to that extent, I'd say that Modi really struck the right note.
So, Dr. Elst, Modi has this legacy, this mixed legacy of Ram Janmabhoomi movement, which was sometimes very bloody, sometimes very peaceful, but most of the time a lot political. He carries this legacy in his history as his previous avatar before he assumed any political position. So he has been part of this political groups also. But now, as a prime minister, he made this speech at the Ramlala's Pratishtha. So he got this distinction of inaugurating the mandir. So doesn't it mean something for his party? Is it just optics? Is it for political gains? Or does he himself identify as belonging to a religious group or the larger nation?
Right.
Or is he just a representative of the nation?
Well, the thing that counts for the elections is the optics. You know, it looked very good. And so the BJP was very much associated with this atmosphere of Hindu revival. To what extent they are meritorious in this, that's an issue we can go deeper into. At any rate, I can see why the enemy doesn't like it. Because on the one hand, you know, as a matter of principle, they think it's not secular that a prime minister in function comes to do this. But what they really care about is that this is going to garner him an enormous amount of Hindu votes. So the BJP has to thank you know, they should not go around proudly, you know, strutting about, oh, you see, we have done this for Rama. No, let's let them first think about what Rama has done for them. But yeah, I mean, they are going to go to the elections now as the party that presided over the inauguration of Ram Lalla. That you can't deny them anymore. So, I mean, these things happen in politics. I don't much care about them. But nevertheless, I make it a point to say that actually a political party should be judged for its political achievements. And it is there that the BJP is rather disappointing. Now, wait a minute. They have two great achievements to their credit. One is economic growth, you know, development. Development especially is impressive. If as a foreigner you come here every year, you know, you see the changes. It's so enormous, you know. It's like, for instance, next week I'm going to the Chanakya University in Bangalore. That university was conceived in May 2020. And already in the summer of 2022, just 2 years later, they started functioning, teaching and so on. All the paperwork had been done, the right professors had been attracted and so on. They started functioning. You see, from China, you would expect that because they have nothing to take into account. You see, no citizens groups protesting or so, it's just dictatorship. Whereas in India, it proves to be just as possible. And so, you know, the dynamism that is now present here is largely the work of the people themselves. If Nehru hadn't imposed this red tape, this license, permit, Raj, and so on, the people would have started achieving things from 1947 onwards, as they did in South and East Africa, in America, in England. And so they were artificially stopped. And when Narasimha Rao declared this liberalization, then suddenly an enormous energy came to life. And so, in a way, the BJP profits from that. But okay, you know, they have guided this energy. And so, to a large extent, this is thanks to the BJP and to a few important cabinet ministers. Then the second thing is the practical stopping of terrorism. I mean, maybe the numbers involved are not very large, but it was an unpleasant life constantly in cities like Mumbai that, you know, if you saw a package on the street, you had to not touch it because who knows, there may be a bomb in there. And so now this has largely normalized. That's a tremendous achievement. So when I was sitting there in Ayodhya and I saw the sharpshooters on the temple roof, you know, I thought, well, you know, the foreign newspapers are going to moralize about that. But effectively, you know, they're heroes and they're necessary. And I think Hindus, at any rate, know that security demands constant vigilance. Sure. So those things the BJP has really achieved. However, that for which Hindus used to vote BJP, that they have absolutely not achieved and not even tried to achieve. You see, there are a number of anti-Hindu discriminations in the constitution and then in other laws and in daily political practice, but starting with the constitution. And so the BJP could have done something about that. And I don't mean Hindu Rashtra. I mean, I agree in principle that the whole concept of the constitution should be rethought, you know, given the essentially colonial origin of the constitution. But nevertheless, we can do with the present constitution on condition that it becomes really secular. I mean, you see, all the scholars and so on start their papers with India is a secular state, moreover fortified by the warning, and the BJP is a threat to the secular state, implying that it is a secular state. Now, it is not, you know, the text of the constitution. And so the BJP could have done something about that. It hasn't, and it hasn't even tried. And so you have all the devotees who are inventing excuses. Like, for instance, they don't have a 2/3 majority. In a number of cases, they don't need it. Like, for instance, Article 30, and that's the most important one, by far the most important one, because it concerns education. It concerns the future. And it is far more important now than in the past. Now everybody goes to school. Now, you see, the history that people get to know is not from, you know, storytellers in the village square who relate the Mahabharata or so. No, the source of knowledge there is the school books. Yes. And so it's very important to wrest control of education from, you know, the communists, the leftists who have controlled it for the past half century. Now, that article says that the minorities cannot be discriminated against. And I'm all in favor of that. Yes. I don't think anybody should be discriminated against. And when the mostly Hindu Constituent Assembly voted that article, clearly they had in mind that obviously the majority can also not be discriminated against. But under Indira, gradually this got reinterpreted. And so now it's a license for discrimination against Hindus. That's why many Hindu organizations involved in education have tried to acquire a non-Hindu minority status. So there is this race to the exit, mainly because of practical, easily identifiable legal reasons, but also increasingly because of the bad reputation of Hinduism. You know, it's a sinking ship, and all the rats are leaving it. So if there are any Hindus present here, it means that they're not rats. But like, for example, the tribal current called Sarna. Sarna is a sacred grove in Jharkhand and Bengal. They have arranged to be recognized at state level as a separate religion.
Yes.
Now, the missionaries, the Christian missionaries, have greatly applauded this because it weakens Hinduism. Yes, but that's not the whole story. Because the main reason why this Sarna group exists is precisely to defend their traditions against the missionaries. And they reason that if we call ourselves Hindus, we are part of this ugly, vicious, oppressive Hinduism. Whereas if we say, no, we are tribal, indigenous, and so on, that sounds good. Then the United Nations and so on, they're all on your side. So you have this de facto depreciation of Hinduism, both psychologically and legally. Now, the psychological thing, many people can help change that. Like, for instance, the rewriting of history. You see, right now, history is very hard on the Hindus, blaming the Hindus for all kinds of things, often writing bad history, like about caste. You know, the whole history of caste is far more subtle. And especially, it does not say, as the missionaries, for example, or the Ambedkarites insist on saying, that caste is intrinsic to Hinduism. It's clearly not. In the Vedas, there was no caste. And so it has a history. It has grown, and now, the last century, it has decreased a lot. But so, at any rate, that history deserves to be told realistically. And so the result of that will be that the present depreciation of Hinduism will become a lot less. Like, for example, why are the Sikhs and not only the Khalistanis insisting hum Hindu nahi? So a large part of the reason is it's ugly to be a Hindu, you know. You see, Hinduism has such a negative reputation, which a true retelling of Indian history will change for the better. I mean, there are so many great achievements on the Hindu side that you ought to be proud of. And so if that story can be realistically told, then, you know, ultimately, after maybe 2-3 generations, this will remedy the present situation. But for that, you really need to take on Article 30. Now, here you don't need a 2/3 majority, because very probably, if you go to the Supreme Court and ask for an authoritative interpretation of this article, the verdict will be that no, the non-discrimination of the minorities does not imply the discrimination against the majority. On the other hand, if that verdict does not come, you go to Parliament, then, first of all, you are almost a 2/3 majority, and moreover, it is easily possible to cobble together a 2/3 majority, because many of the local parties, perhaps even the Congress party, are not against the recognition of equality. I mean, you don't have to do this in the name of Hindu Rashtra or some such idea. No, it's secularism, it's equality. Who could be against equality? And so a number of smaller parties are going to join you, vote in favor of the abolition of these discriminations, and then you have it. Or if nobody does, if you try for a majority and you can't get it, well, then this is a perfect election team. Then you can go to the voter and say, look, you see, we fought for you. And that's in fact what made the difference in 2004. You see, in 2004, India was growing economically enormously. Yet, the government didn't profit from it electorally, because at that time it's only the big business people who profited. It had not yet percolated to the masses as it has now. But so on the Hindu front, the government had absolutely nothing to show. And this had perfectly everything to do with the mentality of Prime Minister Vajpayee, who was absolutely not into Hindutva. But so at the time, some of the people in the central committee of the BJP told Vajpayee, well, before the elections, you should do something Hindu. And so if you say that your allies are against anything pro-Hindu, well, then pick a quarrel with them so that you affirm your own Hindu identity. This is going to attract voters. Well, he didn't want any of it, and we know the result. Okay. Now, today, of course, the atmosphere is so pro-Hindu that any real political achievements won't be noticed, or lack of achievements. So I don't think electorally now it makes a lot of difference. But so let's say for the name of the BJP in history, but more especially for the well-being of Hinduism today or in the near future, is very important that the BJP does address these anti-Hindu discriminations and does remedy them.
But then BJP wants to be seen as a party that is impartial, which is not religious in its approach or in its effect or in its activities, as we've seen.
Well, what's partial about equality?
Nothing is. But actually what happens is the majority does get discriminated against.
Yes.
But, and also there are numerous, the vote base of BJP
Yes.
is largely Hindu. We also know that.
Yes.
So do you think BJP will benefit by going back to its Hindu roots and being overtly and covertly pro-equality?
I certainly do think so. In the 90s, there was a slogan issued, I think, by the BJP itself, that Hindu India, secular India.
Okay.
And
isn't that a very mixed message, Dr. Elst?
No, I think that is a very credible message. Now, of course, it ought to be supported by scholars and so on who,
expand on it.
Yeah, right. Who show that historically this is really correct. This is a short phrase, but actually there's a whole historical reality behind it.
Because we know that heterogeneity in India has survived only because there has been a majority Hindu population who have been able to absorb other cultures and other religions or influences into them. Had it been any other community or religion, they would have perished. We know this. So does the BJP understand this? Is it working towards this kind of a state?
Well, you'll have to do some rethinking and get serious about this message. So for many people, it's a bit new. They're too busy in day-to-day politicking. But nevertheless, it's a very credible and very consistent message, and one that is historically accurate. Why are there Christians in India? Not because the Portuguese conquered this and that. No, originally they were welcomed. They were given asylum.
Yes.
And they were allowed to do whatever they did. They were not allowed to kill cows, I suppose. But otherwise, you see, if they didn't disturb anyone, they were given a place, even a place within caste society. And no questions were asked. You build these churches. What are you doing in these churches? Nobody asked this.
True.
You see, Hindus were used to heterogeneity. Within Hinduism, there was also plenty of, plurality of sects and so on. So, it was just welcome, unlike what happened to the pagans in Christian countries.
Yes.
So you see, the BJP should not be ashamed of being Hindu, which today they are to a large extent.
Dr. Els, thank you for being with us. This has been a very stimulating discussion, and we look forward to more of the same with you on Ayodhya and elections. We'll be coming up with more. Thank you. Namaste.